The ABCs of horror.
Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. Tonight, with my good friend, the Necronomicon, I'm going to take a look at Ju-on the Grudge, which is a Japanese film. And you're not going to believe this, but it completely rips off the American film titled The Grudge. Not only in its name, but also in its plot. Come on, are there no original ideas anymore? (2002's) Ju-on the Grudge. Joking aside, there were a ton of American remakes of Asian horror films in the mid to late 2000s. This initially sparked my interest in the genre, and outside of seeing Pulse, I haven't seen a ton of these Asian films in their original forms, so I thought, what a better time than now. I had watched the American version of The Grudge when it first came onto DVD, and I remember that it scared me pretty good. It may not have stuck with me all that much, or changed me in any way, but it was a tense experience and won my approval. I had no desire to watch it again, or any of its sequels, but I would recommend it if anyone asked. I had heard that Ju-on the Grudge was a far better film than the American remake, so I was super excited to sit down and finally watch it, and it didn't disappoint at all. But before we get into the review, I want to address some of my recently found confusion. You see, the Ju-on series is pretty popular in Japan, spanning 9 films and 2 short films that predate all of the other movies. Ju-on the Grudge is the 3rd real film in the series. I only found this out after I had watched the movie, and I was very surprised by this. Apparently, the first 2 films were only released straight to video, while Ju-on the Grudge was the first film in the series to be released theatrically. It's not a remake. Many fans believe it to be a soft reboot of the series, but it's technically a sequel. It's confusing. Regardless, this is what the American movie remade, so it's also the one that's most easily attainable in the United States. I haven't seen any of the other films in the Ju-on series, so I'm not sure how much I'm missing out. But this seems like a pretty good place to start, at least for me. Apparently the first 2 films in the series didn't have much of a budget, so the quality is pretty hit or miss. Also, the last sequel in the Ju-on series is a versus film where we get to see the ghost girl from Ju-on versus the ghost girl from The Ring. That sounds so stupid, and I want to see it so bad. Speaking of these Asian ghost girls, that actually seems to be a trend in Japanese horror. It seems that the Japanese horror cinema likes to focus on the onryu in their stories. Onryu is a Japanese folktale of a vengeful spirit that is capable of causing harm to the living. This is usually depicted as a female. It seems fresh for American audiences, but it seems to be a cliche, or at least a common trope, for Asian audiences. Ju-on is about a vengeful spirit of a mother, her child, and their cat. They had something horrible happen to them in their own home. Now, anyone who enters their home will die. It doesn't matter if that person leaves or runs away. They are marked as soon as they enter the house, and one day, they will die. It follows the dread and inevitability of death, which is universal and relatable. You don't know what actions you're going to take that will eventually lead to your demise. You could wake up one day and just go to the wrong house or take the wrong step, and death could meet you there. It's bleak, but it shows how fragile we are. How similar is this to the American remake? The answer is, it's fairly similar, but Ju-on the Grudge is far superior in my opinion. Both films are fairly non-linear and have common themes. I mean, it is a remake after all, but the American film is just that. Very American. Hollywood has a certain way of telling stories. You can follow the natural progression and have an idea where the story is going. It's satisfying while you're watching because it follows your expectations. But because it follows the same tropes, it leads to a forgettable and often hollow experience. Ju-on the Grudge doesn't follow your typical Hollywood arches, which makes it a more memorable and often more terrifying experience, at least for Western viewers. Ju-on doesn't force feed you anything. It shows you what it wants to show you, and it doesn't care that it didn't show you everything you wanted to see. I enjoy the way Ju-on tells its story over the American Grudge. Both are non-linear, however, Ju-on seems more episodic. Each episode follows one character at a time, and we see and experience everything that character sees and experiences. It's bite-sized, but very effective. It's also interconnected and makes for an interesting way to tell the story. Ju-on the Grudge is subtle, dark, atmospheric, and creepy. I jumped so many times at legitimately scary parts. Oh, that's another thing. This movie will not fake scare you. You feel every scare, and there's a ton of them. A normal horror movie would have something bumping along in the closet, and sure, Ju-on has that too, but the normal horror movie would have a cat jump out, scaring the character, and letting the audience's guard down. Oh, it's just a cat. It's just a cat. Don't worry. Oh, this horror movie isn't even trying to scare us. It's okay. Ju-on, on the other hand, has a cat in the closet, but it's literally just chilling and sitting there. It's not trying to scare us, but that's what makes it bone-chilling in a way. Instead of saying, "Oh, thank goodness there was a cat there," we end up saying, "Why is there a cat there?" It's little subtle things like that that go a long way. I also love the sound design. There isn't much of a score unless you're watching the Hindi dubbed version, which sounds like this. But the original Japanese version instead focuses on sound design in negative spaces. And holy cow, this puts a shiver down your spine. Not only do we have the famous death rattle, but we also have cat sounds and the dragging of something. This may be the film's greatest strength. I would recommend this movie over the American remake any day. The American remake is too bright, too tightly cut, afraid to put darkness in negative spaces, and too formulaic. It's not a bad film, but it's nothing compared to Ju-on the Grudge. It's one of the creepiest and nightmare-inducing films that I can think of. Just remember that it's not your typical Hollywood film. You may be upset with how things turn out because it isn't spoon-fed for you. It may require you to think, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Just don't hold a grudge against it.